Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about You, Season 4, Episode 7. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Okay, so things between Joe and Kate are good. They're actually really good. In fact, the whole thing of when he's like, yo, she's almost very telepathic, and how when he's kind of lost in her thoughts, she's like, there you go again, what are you actually thinking? It's like she's so good at reading him. It's very reminiscent. I was going to go into details about it, but I decided to kind of delete that part of it and just you know what, I'm going to be vague about it. But if you've seen season 2 of Fleabag, it reminds me of a certain relationship in season 2 where it's like something similar happens to a character and another character calls him out for doing this thing. I'm keeping it vague, but if you've seen Fleabag, because I don't want to spoil it, because Fleabag is so good that I don't want to spoil that for anyone. But if you've seen it, you know what I'm referencing, hopefully. So it kind of reminded me of that dynamic, interestingly enough. So, and I love them kind of being like, oh yeah, we'll work on our charity together. It's like taking care of orphans, teaching them this, teaching them how to swim. Oh, these lucky effing orphans. Oh yeah, and they're kind of joking and stuff. And obviously, Joe's got to deal with the whole Tom Lockwood situation of it all, because once again, just like I brought up last episode, despite him being a terrible human being, it's still Kate's dad that you would be killing, so that'd be kind of a big no-no. So it devastates her, so obviously Joe doesn't want to go down that route. In fact, to learn more about Tom, which I glimpsed the name in the opening credits, but it didn't, I saw it out of my purview. I didn't really pay as much of attention until the episode went further and we saw what Tom looked like for the first time. I was like, is that Greg Kinnear? Had to go back and I was like, oh yeah, there's his name. It's like, I thought I saw a name. I was like, Greg Kinnear. Wouldn't have never thought they were going to cast him. And then I was like, oh, then her mom must be British since he's super American. So I was like, okay, so her mom must be British. But either way, maybe they had brought that up before. I guess him being kind of an evil person, you don't have to be American to lean it, to be, you don't have to be an American, powerful person to be, evil. But it just feels like a lot of times that ends up being a case of the powerful people in the world that ended up being kind of the most horrible tend to be American billionaires and rich people and powerful people. So I see why that they really went out of their way to make character specifically American in that regard. But regardless, he uses Kate's, because Kate normally gets out of town when her father comes to town, but Joe convinced her to hey, go see him, show him that you're doing great. It was supposed to be his way, obviously, to help her and support her, but also it was subtly so he could go and meet the man and find out. And the sad thing is, they end up meeting up, and it's man, he is very charming, and he also knows exactly who Joe is. And now the question is well, how much does he know? Does he know? And then later on, he asks about love, and you're like, oh, so he knows a good bit. But then that makes you quite, because jumping around a little bit, he only brings up love, so he doesn't know about Beck. So that's interesting. And he also doesn't know about Candace. To be fair, first time Candace was around, that was him. Second time around, that was Love, but still. So the only one he's really, at least as far back as he's been able to trace Joe, is, maybe his childhood and stuff, but when it comes to murder stuff, it's Love. He even asked later on, he's did you murder your wife? It's okay. And Joe's no, she killed herself. She was ill and stuff. I even love later on when he's oh, no, you definitely killed your wife. He's it's fine. Your wife seemed like she was a maniac. He was kind of I'm just, yeah, it's fine. And I'm not going to get too caught up in the details. So that was kind of interesting. But we'll talk about it just shows you how scary Tom is, because he's so charming. Even Kate's getting swept up in it. She talks about how terrible her father is, but even she's caught up in smiling and laughing when he's telling stories about oh yeah, my daughter wanted to buy all the dogs at a pound and ended up going through the list of everyone I knew on my phone, telling each and every one of them they're going to get a dog. But they said Barbara Streisand turned down the dog or whatever. So they're happy, they're laughing until her dad brings out this museum that he's building with Kate's name. It's Kate Lockwood is hey, you could take some of my art and you can put it in some of my pieces that I own in there, and you could do whatever you need to, this be something of your own that you can own. And Kate's issue with it is she almost said yes. She's on the spot, I almost said yes. And for her, that feels like such an indictment against her, that despite everything, despite her reservations about her father, it's so easy to get caught up in it. He's so charismatic, and that those are the most scary villains. I mean, look at Joe. Joe is scary because he is super charismatic because no one sees him for who he is. Obviously, you have your breakout instances of like 40 saw Joe for who he kind of was, but to be fair, that's also because 40, was trying to protect his sister, so there's that whole angle of it all as well. So, but the fact is, having such a charming, rich and powerful person, kind of knowing who you really are, wanting dirt on Reese, so you're like, okay, so he doesn't know about Reese being the rich killer, but he wants Reese removed from the board. And once again, why does Reese want him dead? Turns out Reese wants him dead because he can basically prove everything about Reese in his books is like fabricated. Not everything, but he fudged his rags to riches story a little bit. And so, I mean, if that's not bad enough, Joe is also unaware that he's got Nadia breathing down his neck because she's trying to figure out this whole thing with Jonathan and what's her boyfriend's name? Home dude suggested like, oh, you think some average person, because she's like, right, the person who hears voices and stuff like that is in love with famous people and stuff. It's too on the nose for her to be the one that's the eat the rich killer. It's more like an average Joe, like, which obviously funny phrasing using considering his name is Joe, and I'm sure that also plays into the grand scheme of things. Like into just all that is Joe, I think that's also probably why he is given the character, probably, why even in a book, the character is given the name Joe, because he is supposed to be like, yes, he's charming, he's this and that, but, he's just your average white male. So he's supposed to be kind of like your average Joe in some regards. Maybe like a little more handsome, a little more smarter, a little more charming than your average Joe, but still. So I'd never really given that too much thought in the previous seasons until Nadia said the term average Joe. I never correlated that might be the deeper meaning behind Joe having the character of Joe having that name Joe. But either way, Nadia won't let that go. And so now she's wondering about Joe and starts asking questions. Oh, she wants to get closer to him. It's like, oh, did you read my story? Which he hasn't because of everything going on. But he knows who Nadia is. He sees how smart she is. And he's like, the last thing I need is my smartest student asking smart questions. So he's shutting down her investigation. And he's like, yeah, the reason why because she was like asking so many questions about like, oh, do you really think that Dawn is actually the eat? Like she's asking too many questions that are related to all of that. And he tried to shut it down by being like, hey, I had to stop at page 15. Like, you're overcomplicating things. Make them simple. And then all Nadia had to do was go, oh yeah, like the Miranda thing at page. He's like, yeah, just make it simple. And she knew then and there, all right, you're lying. You never read my book. She's like, you are articulate enough that if you were to like read it, you would have given me legit criticism. I get it, but because Joe's flying by the seat of his pants. Yes, he can be like very plan heavy and savvy, but there's a lot he doesn't account for. He wasn't expecting to get blindsided by her, but the problem is he chose something too specific. He shouldn't have gotten specific about page 15. He should have been like, yeah, there's something, but if he didn't get very specific like that, he knew that she'd be like, well, what's the issue? He's like, if he kept it vague enough, maybe, but even then, like Nadia's super smart, so she probably still would have asked a question regardless. Then you have Kate, who's trying to help Phoebe, which Phoebe's in the fallout of everything last episode. She's a little manic herself, which Kate's like, hey, you need help. The fact is, we need to actually get you some medical professional help, regulate the medication you're on, because she fired everyone around her because she's paranoid. Understandably, it's like you have PTSD and she wants to just get rid of it. But it's like, that's not, your friends around you were brutally murdered. You were taken hostage by your stalker. So, especially because you believe her to be the eat the rich killer. So you could have easily been her next victim too. So plus Joe's your friend, Jonathan's your friend. So you're worried he was about to get killed too. It's all traumatic. And then you have Adam like worming his way back into the situation. The moment he's like, no, it's just a drive. And then he goes over and kisses her being like, oh, I miss you. I'm like, I knew it. He's a slimy bastard opportunist that he is. And the moment Kate's back was turned, like he took advantage of Phoebe because he knew like, oh, she's in such a vulnerable moment. That makes you even more of a garbage human being. You're like, oh, she's vulnerable now. Let me take advantage of it because she kicked you to the curb and he wasn't going to let that go. He, showing you how despicable he is. That isn't like, oh, I'm a better person now. Oh, I've lost everything. Even Kate was like, you didn't lose everything. He's like, everything that mattered. It's like, because he's like, yeah, I still have my Aston for like one more day. But it's like, oh, you suck. You suck all the balls, you piece of shit. You once again, because you feel bad because Phoebe and Kate amongst that group, and Connie because he's putting in the work, as we know. I mean, it probably won't pop up until later in the season, but it's like, yeah, he's just garbage, and like Phoebe and Kate are like, I was referencing Adam in that regard, not Connie, but like, yeah, Phoebe and Kate are the only good people amongst that group, and you have this swarmy bastard like taking advantage of it, taking advantage of her when she's in such a distressed place. And you saw that look when Adam and her were kissing. He made sure to look at Kate like, like it's almost like a sticking my tongue out, flipping you to bird type of thing. And it's like, oh, it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I wonder, will we end up with a situation where Kate ends up killing Adam because it's like, yeah, I got to kill you because I got to protect my friend, and that means protecting her from herself, also means protecting her from you. She can't see you from the terrible person that you are. You're going to drag her down. She's a good person, and you're not. So I could definitely see Kate potentially killing him, kind of like, because this episode really leans into the fact is Kate definitely has her darker side to her, as we learn, because she opens up to Joe that this stuff she talks about her dad building a pipeline and giving people cancer. It's like, no, that was me. I was 19. I did it because, to prove myself to be the strong woman I was, I had to prove myself in that world. And she numbed herself. She compartmentalized. And obviously we see that ended. I mean, we know that was a part of her upbringing because of her mom. And now it's become a default for her because of that. And now, that's also how she dealt with everything that she did, all the terrible stuff she did. And it's like, it's not just my dad that ruined lives, I did. And she takes it upon herself. And even Joe's like, right, she blames herself for being the monster her father made her into one. It's like, you're not. Which there's commonality with Joe. I'm not saying it's excusable in Joe's condition. I mean, I'm saying the same thing probably in Kate's case too. Like, her choices, her decisions were her own, regardless of what motivated them, whether it was just to prove herself to herself or everyone around her or her dad. She still did what she did. Same thing for Joe, but we know Joe's psychology is a byproduct of his upbringing, being left behind by his mom. Well, his mom being abused, then being left behind by his mom, and then finding his mom all that years later, finding out she started a new family without him. Like, yes, that's going to leave some psychological scars, turning him into the Joe that we know. Like, once again, doesn't excuse it, but it is a matter of understanding, just like Kate. So there's a lot more deeper parallels between them. So, and Joe says, like, what makes love so special, why it's so important, it's second chances. It gives us all second chances. He's like, I never, considering all that I've done, my past, I never thought I'd be here right now happy. So, it's a thing of like, once again, we don't have to fully let our past define us, because Kate was kind of almost saying we were doomed from the start, because it isn't just my dad. It's like, maybe my dad made me into what I am or played some role in it, but I'm still responsible for my action, for my choices. So she's done bad. Joe's done bad. I'm sure she still wouldn't put her bad as like, I'm sure she wouldn't be like, oh, your bad is worse than mine. It's like, Joe's killed quite a few people, but she's caused devastation, and it's not, it's like we both done terrible things, let's not compare and contrast like sins, In the episode, we also had Joe trying to pull one over on Reese. It's like, all right, rather than killing Tom, because that'd be a difficult thing, plus I don't want to hurt Kate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Reese to confess, give that evidence to Tom, and because it's like, right, if I expose Reese, it's just going to expose me in the process. So I'll give it to Tom. Tom will destroy Reese. It's a win-win. And then all of a sudden, like, that's what I couldn't understand. It's like, how did Reese know? He's like, do you smell that? And it's like, what? It smells like a rat. It's like, how would you even know that? Like, I was like, are you that good at reading, Joe, or what? And then he found out of her core. I'm like, yo, this is wild. And he's like, all right, I got Marion. It's like, wait, what? Yeah, do what I want you to do, or she's dead, It's like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. It's like, that's an interesting development. And he's like, I let her go, and now it's like, I guess in his mind, it's like, it's my fault, because if I had stayed by her side, and him even being like, her daughter needs her mom. Obviously he pulled, like, because obviously he got to know them so much, obviously over season 3. But it's also the fact is that, hey, I'm also someone who has a complicated relationship with their mother, and I know what it's like for a child to need their mother. So which obviously didn't stop him from killing his own child's mother. But it's like, love is more of a danger to Henry, despite not recognizing how much of a danger you are to your own son. But hey, you did right by your son by leaving him with someone else. But, that's a whole thing. So now he has no choice but to kill Tom. So he sets up a meet with Tom, and he was about to, but Tom's like, okay, so I know who you are. I know what you did. I'm gonna give you some options. The fact of the matter is, I can help you, Joe. The fact of the matter is, I know you killed your wife. Once again, she's manic. I'm not gonna chastise you for it. So I want you to do it again. I want you to kill Reese. Now, it's not even the fact is that he knows that Reese is the rich killer. It's like, it will convenience both of us. I know you know the guy better than you let on, and it's like, yeah, like it'll probably convenience us both if you just end up killing him. He's like, the third option is you could try and kill me. He's like, right, you could aim right here at my heart. You could stab me. You're like, the fact is he chose that word specifically, but maybe because he knows that's kind of Joe's modus operandum. Not really, but like that's Joe's more preferred way of handling things is stabbings. And it's like, right, you're not much of a gun person, Maybe that's, or maybe he did get like he's once again he's good. That guy's good, and maybe he just knows that Joe had a knife on him, and it's like, no, you could stab me, but I think my option of you killing Reese, I give you his address and everything where he's hiding out, kill him, and we're good, we're golden, like, I can actually help you out in the end. I'm like, you're making a deal with the devil, but for Joe, he thinks it's the lesser of the two evils, because this way, for one, Reese has got Marion, so it's like, even more reason, like, hey, I need to take him out. So, he ends up confronting Reese. At the same time that's all happening, we get the scene with with Nadia breaking into Joe's apartment, and she ended up finding a book with a key in it. And you're like, what the hell is that about? She also saw the torture book, but we see where that comes into play later on with the whole torturing Reese thing. But yeah. So while Joe's dealing with Reese, who's like, yeah, who are you? Do I know you? All right, Lee. And Joe's like, all right, you're being stupid. And the moment it happened, I was like, wait, does Reese have a twin brother? Have you been interacting with his twin brother this and that? Those were my initial thoughts. I was like, okay, is that what we're doing here? I was like, how is this possible? It's like, no one said anything until now, so that's why I was so confused. So, when it's all said and done, at the same time, Joe's trying to get information out of Reese, and Reese's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Joe ends up snapping and killing him. Nadia took that key, went across the street, because the reason why is because, like, Dawn had been following Joe, and her boyfriend, Nadia's boyfriend, got those photos and ended up sending them to Nadia, like, hey, there might be something up with Professor Moore. She goes down in the tunnel, and at the same time, Joe thought, like, oh, it's all over. I'll find you some other way, Marion. And all of a sudden, Reese shows up. I was like, what the fuck? And then it's like, oh, yeah. I'm like, wait. I'm like, are we saying the simplest answer is Joe had a psychotic break and he's seeing stuff that... So the Reese when you actually think about it, every time Joe interacted with the Reese, it was just him by himself talking to Reese. So it's always been in his head. His mind splintered, and basically the dark side of Joe has risen to the surface. Joe versus the Jonathan he wants to be. The good in Joe is the guy we've been following, whereas like the Reese we've been seeing, the one who's the bad guy in all of this, is Joe. Joe's the eat the rich killer. So I guess he had a psychotic break and did all this. Because at first I was like, well, there's that option. But then I was like, not unless this is all Tom, and Tom got some guy to like get surgery to look like. I'm like, I don't think we'd go that far. It's like, I think we're just like, this is basically Joe's dark passenger, Dexter, if you're familiar with it. He's basically in his Dexter bag right now, except his dark passenger is, I mean, there's actually movies, because I don't want to spoil anything, because there's movies that have kind of had a similar thing. Oh, God. Because I don't want to reference a movie. There's a movie that's from years ago, and I think it's a French movie. I've seen it like once or twice. I don't remember the original French title. I remember the English translated title. It might be that literal translation, but there's a movie that has a twist where it's like, oh, the killer was this person all along, because they had a psychotic break and they were the actual killer, but they thought, oh, I'm the hero of the story, chasing after the hero. So Joe's in that bag. Once again, I'm sure there's other stories I feel like have had that, and I just can't think of any right now. There's another one I'm thinking of that kind of has that to some extent, but that's a major plot twist, so I'd rather not say that one either. But at the same time, that's all happening because Reese was like, he's like, right, he didn't really know you, Joe, but I wasn't lying either when I said we had Marion. And then Nadia finds Marion. So I was like, oh, wow. So Joe is back to his old thing of like locking in people in boxes again. We had it. Hasn't he done that all 4 seasons? Hasn't that happened all 4 seasons? Because didn't he do it in season 1 as well? I definitely know season 2 and 3 had it. I'm pretty sure it's been in 1. So I was like, oh, we brought back the box. Yeah, because it was in New York as well, because that's how the guy, the guy that Joe like learned so much from, that guy ended up that's where they like put the books to kind of keep them safe, regardless and all that. So of course the box is going to make its return, and I thought that's so interesting how they did it. Now, because my biggest question was like, wow, it's like Toddy, the actress who plays Miriam, I was like, is she only going to be in 1 episode? Because I didn't know maybe she was off filming something else, because I still need to watch it, but I know she was in Kaleidoscope. Like, I think she's one of the major roles in Kaleidoscope. So I was wondering if maybe that and maybe some other stuff she was filming made it so she couldn't be in this season that much, or was it just, oh, it was written like that way so we can get the twist here, or was it just a thing of, oh, it left them, because of the schedule of it all, we can write it in a way to incorporate that as a twist. That now she's back in the story, or it's like, no, it was always going to be like this way. Meaning, maybe the moment she got on the train, Joe didn't just let her go. At that moment, he had a psychotic break. The moment she was like, oh, you're a bad guy, you're a murderer. He had a psychotic break. I mean, you can make the argument he already had one when he started doing all this stuff, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, that's when Reese, quote unquote, Reese appeared, took Marion, and she's probably been down there ever since. Maybe? Or maybe this is a more recent development. I have no idea. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where the hell all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, as we kind of figure this out and kind of get the timetable potentially. So, and now Nadia knows. Once again, not less, that isn't all in Joe's head and that's some other thing, but it feels like that's all aiming in Joe's head. And now Nadia found Marion, and it's like, what are you going to do about that? If it ends up being what I thought it was, or not less, Joe is being framed, but is he being framed by a real person, or is he being framed by his own mind who's doing all this stuff? Because those photos that Dawn took, I'm like, I don't remember Joe ever. Some of that doesn't, I mean, obviously it could be like in between episodes and just Joe in London doing his thing, but it just seemed like, I don't know. It's definitely going to all be a lot clearer in the next episode, but I'm so excited to see what happens. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.